becomes first NFL player to be paid in Bitcoin. Prop up this cryptocurrency market, Jack.
Here's my message to the NFL when they come out with headlines like that. You're right. We don't have no relationship to the NFL. The NFL would never let Russell do anything like this. The NFL does not treat their players fair. Athletes operate as independent businesses and take care of themselves because they should, because no one else does it for them. And that's not fair. Russell wanted Bitcoin and they wouldn't allow it. So what I did is I built a consumer facing product where you don't have to go through HR, you don't have to go through payroll. It's in the hands of the individual. If the individual wants to allocate a percentage of their income, of their paycheck, and save it and protect their wealth and free themselves, they have the power to do that with this product, and we don't need anyone's permission for that. So why is the NFL disassociating from this headline? I don't know, but I could tell you this. It doesn't surprise me one bit. That's right on brand with them. And Russell's doing what's in his best interest and what's in his family's best interest, and we're here to support that. And so, I think Bitcoin's going to continue to make headlines. It's the biggest thing that's ever happened while any of us have been alive. It's a transformative technology, and it's ushering in one of the greatest wealth transfers of all time, and it's ultimately hope for humanity. And so whether it's the NFL or whatever's next, it'll always be in the headlines. But in particular, the NFL's disassociation from what Russell is doing is, it's exemplifying of exactly the problem that Russell is trying to solve. And I couldn't be more proud of Russell. This is actually all about him and less about me. But I'm happy and proud of my company in aiding towards his effort. I think it's a big deal for not only athletes, but for the everyday individual that's looking to protect themselves from asset inflation and the Federal Reserve's absolute must in printing cash.
Jack,
Yo, freaks. It's your boy Matt Odell here for episode 3 of Citadel Dispatch. Very excited for this one. We have our good friends Dergigi and Croesus BTC with us. We will be discussing, the main topics we'll be discussing today is shitcoin regrets and pricing the world in sats. But we won't stop there. As you guys know, no topics are off limits here. So we're looking forward to you guys in the audience helping propel this conversation forward and seeing where it takes us. How's it going, guys?
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, going well. I'm stoked after watching Jack there.
Shit gets you hyped, right?
Yeah, he wasn't pulling any punches. It was great.
Yeah, it's hard not to be hyped right now because just it seems like everything is happening at once. Like all the things that Bitcoiners have been writing about for a couple of years are all happening at the same time, and that's just how it seems to be happening. As they say, gradually then suddenly, and we see players getting their salary in sats pretty much in a roundabout way, be it, but still we see speculative attacks, we see streaming sats, we see all kinds of beautiful things.
So one of the ways I like to start the show is asking everyone what they're having to drink today. I expect everyone in the audience to let us know via text. Gigi, are you enjoying anything with us today?
Oh yeah, as I told you, I had like a time zone. I messed up my time zone, let's put it like that. And I started 2 hours early, actually, and I popped open a Talisker Storm for you, Matt. So that's what I'm drinking.
Classic. I like that.
Nice. That's a good plop.
Talisker solid. I'm actually drinking mezcal today. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Del Maguey. Definitely just butchered it.
That's good for a drink,
But mezcal is fucking fantastic. I think it's like, I think it's got a very Scotch-like taste to me.
I'm 2 hours ahead, so Excuse me if I'm a little bit more buzzy than usual, so I'll try my best to stay sober for as long as I can.
Let her rip, Gigi. Let's hear what you really think.
Yeah, it's time for a little bit of celebration. It's just every day, every one of us wakes up, no matter where you are in the world. It's like, Bitcoin is waking up with a large green boner in her pants, and it's just wild to see. It's a wild ride.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm
yeah.
drinking Modelo over here, so it was just what was left in the fridge. I guess I finished my IPA, my 6-pack of Lagunitas yesterday, so Modelo is on the menu.
There you go. Well, cheers to all the freaks out there. Um, I'm very excited as usual to get going here on Citadel Dispatch. I guess the best place to start seems to be this Russell Okung news. We have the first NFL player that's being so-called paid in sats, and I was wondering what your guys' take is here on this.
Yeah, I think it was just a matter of time until something like that it was going to happen. And of course, it made a big splash, and it's a very strong PR move. But I think, the way I like to think about that is that there are some people that have been living on a Bitcoin standard for quite some time, that have been, already saying half their income, like if they still earn fiat. There are even people that have been earning sats for quite a while, and I just see the circle of people living on a Bitcoin standard expanding. And with Michael Saylor, for example, we saw a company moving into a similar direction. And of course, there are smaller companies that operate on sats as well. And so, yeah, I think that's one way to think about it, that just more and more people are jumping on the train of the Bitcoin standard, and the Bitcoin standard is priced in sats. And so your salary or part of it is going to be priced in sats, and you just love to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about, I feel like the last year has been the year of like 0 to 1 firsts for Bitcoin in several ways. Like we had Paul Tudor Jones being like the first big name investor coming out and saying, actually, Bitcoin is legit and going to be the fastest horse. Then we had MicroStrategy being the first corporate treasury, first public company, corporate treasury, to say we are going to choose Bitcoin over dollars. And that set a precedent, just like Paul Tudor Jones set a precedent. And we've been witnessing those precedents turn into a trickle of more people following suit, and the institutional buying over the last 3 months has been a direct follow-on from those precedents. And then now with Russell, we are seeing a first with a totally different type of adoption than anything else we'd seen before, of like big name, high salary individuals demanding to be paid in Bitcoin, and now the infrastructure of Strike making that possible has this multiplicative effect of like the possibilities of Bitcoin adoption are so much greater now than they were 4 years ago, and now these new precedents are possible, and we'll see what sort of followers follow suit from Russell's news.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Gigi said, a lot of us have been basically doing what Russ is doing now, including Russ himself, presumably. Taking your fiat paycheck and basically using it to dollar cost average into Bitcoin, to stack into Bitcoin as much as possible. But this is it feels more of like a signaling mechanism to me. It feels like something that really flips a switch in people's heads, that you're getting paid in better money. You're not getting paid, like no one gets paid in Apple stock or something. It takes it away from being like an investment. It makes it more tangible. And really, if you're not pricing everything in your life in sats already, you're short Bitcoin. But it's good to see, one step towards that ultimate goal, right? Because I think the ultimate direction that Bitcoiners end up at is that they realize that everything is priced in sats. Your take-home pay is priced in sats, like you said. This is basically your worth on a yearly basis, and that goes down year over year over year forever.
Yeah, and this realization leads you to making several investments, for example, in a hair cutting machine, and you start to cut your own hair because every time you go to a hairdresser, it's just millions and millions of sats. So yeah, I think this calculation that Bitcoiners are doing, more and more people are waking up to that. And yeah, as Bitcoin Tina also likes to say, he's been saying it since forever that what we're witnessing is the whole world being repriced in sats, and yeah, you can think of it as the great reset, so to speak. And it's just beautiful to see
that work yesterday or 2 days ago.
that this is actually happening, and it's happening, as you say, like the Bitcoin hive mind is more and more expanding. And at first it was like 2 or 3 crazy people on Bitcoin Twitter that were just like, sell your shares and cut your own hair and so on and so forth. And I think that the circle of people that understand that will just expand and expand. And it's in part because of just the general macro situation and people just realizing that money printer go brr won't stop anytime soon. And on the other hand, I think it's also because there's just so much information, pure Bitcoin only information out there. You can really educate yourself quite quickly as compared to, let's say, like 2015. And it's really distilled, and it's also distilled in memes, and it's just iteration upon iteration upon iteration. And in the end, I think what most people will have a problem with is that it almost sounds too easy, like just stack sats until hyper-Bitcoinization is complete.
Sounds like a fucking scam.
Yeah,
it sounds cost average into generational wealth.
It's impossible. It's too good to be true. And I think that's a big reason that pre-coiners, especially, my yuppie people, are not there yet. It's just too good to be true, but that's what's happening. That's what we're watching play out in front of us.
So I'm learning as a host here. This is our 3rd episode of Citadel Dispatch, and I kind of fucked up the order. I guess like I'm supposed to, in the beginning of a show, introduce you guys and have you guys like explain to the audience who the fuck you are. So I guess let's start with Gigi. Gigi, I've known you for a while now. I consider you a good friend. What's the deal with you and Bitcoin?
Yeah, I don't know. Man, where to start even? I'm a super slow learner. I think that's what I learned from Bitcoin. So in one way or another, I've been in touch with Bitcoin for quite a while, but it took me so long to really dive in and understand it. And I think my biggest problem was that I come from a tech background and I studied computer science, and I just didn't see the money in it. I only saw the tech. And so I got lured into all kinds of shitcoins, like every shitcoin under the sun. And I just didn't understand what it's all about, and that this is actually a monetary revolution. And once I understood that, I kind of wanted to tell other people about it because I thought it's kind of important. And that led me to writing a bunch of articles. And those articles actually turned into a book called 21 Lessons. And I think that's what most people know me for. So I'm the author of 21 Lessons, and you can read the book online for free and also listen to the audiobook online for free on 21lessons.com.
Yeah, I mean, 21 Lessons is fucking fantastic. So everyone should go check that out.
Yeah. Of course,
bro,
the story continues, but I'm not sure if I want to just harp on. So I'm now in Bitcoin full time. I did a bunch of other things in the Bitcoin space. I started Bitcoin Resources. I wrote a bunch of other articles. I'm working on a second book. I'm now part of the Swan Bitcoin team, and I'm doing engineering there and also.
What's the deal with that? What do you do?
Yeah. So I'm working full stack pretty much. It's not too long ago that I joined, so I'm still kind of feeling like the new guy, but it's getting better every day. And yeah, I have the privilege to work in Bitcoin full time, and I love every minute of it. And I'm very grateful to be part of the Swan, because I think AutoDCA is the best thing you can do for yourself and also for like a peaceful and less chaotic transition towards a global Bitcoin standard. And yeah, Corey and Jan started Swan Bitcoin not too long ago. I guess it went live in March last year, so not even a year old. And yeah, I just reached out and was like, if you're just looking for coders that know their way around code bases and tech and stuff, I'm willing to help. And so yeah, they were happy to have me on board. And ever since, yeah, I'm I'm chilling in the pond with the guys, and the Swan team is going strong, and we're trying our best to educate people and also provide easy and low fee services to to basically auto DCA and buy Bitcoin.
Okay, we appreciate the shield, Gigi. Crow, what's the deal with you?
Yeah, so I guess similar to Gigi, I first came at all this from like a technology investment lens, and heard about it from like more technical classmates in business school. Actually got me interested in Ethereum back then, and so I took someone recently described it as the most painful path to Bitcoin, aka going through altcoins first. So I was interested in Ethereum, and then that led to a whole bunch of other altcoins in the last major cycle, 2016, 17. That was what I was doing. Rode that up, and then rode it all the way down in 2018, and was frustrated as all hell about like why were my wonderful technology altcoins underperforming, and was forced to finally pay attention to these lunatic Bitcoin maximalists who had been ranting and raving about everything to anyone who would listen, and also telling everybody to who was in altcoins to go curl up and die, or kind of sentiment. And so finally got around to reading the Bitcoin Standard and realized that actually this rabbit hole goes way deeper, way deeper. It, in fact, undoes all of the MBA education and management consulting knowledge that I received in my career, and had to get deep enough to understand that my understanding of economics and how central banking works and how money works was completely wrong, and that Bitcoin's on an inevitable path to overtake those institutions and replace them as the base layer of our civilization. So that's sort of been my arc to get to Bitcoin, but it started by being a greedy technology investor trying to make a buck off of these new forms of digital money and payment rails that I thought Ethereum was going to be.
Well, thank you for that confession. We appreciate it. I kind of love that I just put the price ticker at the start of this episode, and it's just been pumping. So you're not really a freak if you're not trying to stack to increase the price over 35K while we're live on air here.
I love the guy Fartface 2000 who's like, can we slow down the price ticker? It's just it's pumping way too hard.
Yes, I mean, I think that's a good entry point here. I want to talk about shitcoin regrets. I don't know. And then we'll go back to pricing the world in sats maybe, and then we'll continue from there. Maybe that'll be the plan. Unless someone in the audience hits us with some, really bold question or something, and then we'll just go on some really long tangent. Or if the price just pumps, then we might just lose focus and I'll just pull up a chart and we can just stare at it together. So shitcoin regrets. I think most people come in through the shitcoin side. Maybe recently it's different. Because we have this, expansive like Bitcoin only network almost that has been nurtured on Bitcoin Twitter and adjacent platforms, and we have all these podcasts now, and we have stuff like 21 Lessons. We have businesses that have basically sprung up like Swan, and Cash App that are trying to basically leverage that Bitcoin only concept as you know, as almost a brand building and marketing exercise that didn't exist last cycle. But previous to that, a lot of people came in through shitcoins, and then they presumably got burned. They touched the fire like a little child, and then that's when they learned their lesson, right? So I think it'd be helpful to people coming in now, because they come in now and their first question, no matter what, everyone's first question is almost always, well, what about this one? Maybe I missed the boat. Am I too late to buy Bitcoin?
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a good way to tee this up. I think like the refrain that Bitcoiners need to focus on, and that exists for us now, and I think is extremely powerful, is that absolute scarcity is a one-time invention, and that's Bitcoin. And any copy of a system of digital scarcity is by definition not scarce, because what's the marginal cost of creating an additional copy after that? Nothing. So there's no scarcity in any copies of the first and only instance of digital scarcity that matters, and that's Bitcoin. And that kind of like philosophical framing of it didn't exist a few years ago. In fact, the article that really put me over the edge on like no altcoin matters at all whatsoever forever was Breedlove's the number 0 in Bitcoin, which was only released like a year ago. And so yeah, it's amazing to me that Bitcoin's been around like 12 years now, and we only just figured out the way to articulate what makes it so special. But now we have it, and now we can focus on that and nip that question in the bud when new coiners are trying to find something that can, something new that they can outpace Bitcoin with.
Yeah, and to be fair, like it's very difficult to understand. So to anyone listening to this who still believes that something else will overtake Bitcoin, or it might be worth to diversify in the quote unquote cryptocurrency space or something, it takes a long time and a lot of deep thinking and a lot of studying also of monetary history and stuff like that to really understand it, and also to understand the fundamentals why this is true. And I think that's also the reason why Bitcoiners just came up with shorthand solutions, and also basically telling people to just have fun staying poor if they are not willing to learn and listen themselves. And that's I love how this is, by the way, like it's a distillation of the original Satoshi quote. Like if you don't get it or don't want to believe me, then I don't have the time to explain it to you. So that I forget the exact quote, but that's basically what he said. And so that's basically what Bitcoiners are saying now as well. But I also think that it's important to point out that this actually can be understood. So I was at a place not too long ago where I didn't understand it at all. And I think I understand it now quite well. Why it is the case that Bitcoin is a 0 to 1 invention, and it is also path-dependent invention. Like it can be done again. And as Croesus said, it's like digital scarcity only happens once. And Bitcoin put the cherry on top by choosing the terminal inflation rate of 0%. So we not only have digital scarcity, we have absolute scarcity, like perfect digital scarcity. We never had that before, and we will never have that again, because you can think about it in a way that the problem that Bitcoin solved, like the problem that Satoshi solved, is a very, very peculiar one, because you cannot solve you cannot invent a form of information that cannot be copied. You can always copy information, and you can always copy it perfectly, because you always have error correction. If you can read something, like if you can read a certain kind of information, you can always copy it. That's just the way information works. And this will always be true, and this is also true in Bitcoin. Like every single part in Bitcoin can be copied. The ledger is copied all the time. The blocks are copied. Your private key can be copied. You can have like 10 different backups in 10 different locations of your private key. Like nothing is unique in Bitcoin in the sense of it cannot be copied, so to speak. The only thing that can't be copied in Bitcoin is the NGU technology. That's what can't be copied. And it's really difficult to understand that, because what Bitcoin does is it builds a protocol, it builds a network that makes invalid copies useless. So it only takes care of valid copies, and it does it in a way that you produce this ledger, and this ledger, the entries in the ledger are what are absolutely scarce. And so creating a second ledger that has the same properties is completely senseless, because why would you have two ledgers? Like why would you? It doesn't make sense, and it's also, you have all the network effects and everything else. It's like talking a different language and so on and so forth. And I think what's important to understand for newcomers is, for other inventions, it's not that all inventions tend towards one. It's also not that all networks tend to trend towards one, but value does. You can't. It doesn't make sense, or you just can't park value in different things. You always have to diversify. You cannot. If you have a regular file, you can burn it on a CD. If your kids still know what it is, you can put it on a USB stick, and you can upload it to some online service, and you can upload it to another online service, and you can store it on your hard drive, and you can print it out, and so on and so forth. But with value, that's not true. You have to decide. You either buy a house, or you buy stock, or you invest it in whiskey or something. And so money is way stronger in that regard than almost all other things. And money is also a language and like a communication layer and so on. And so the effects that are behind Bitcoin are insanely strong. And I would also point out that all the buzzwords in Bitcoin are so horrible, like how it's cryptocurrency, even though it doesn't even use encryption in the first place. It's just digital signatures and hashes. So nothing is encrypted in Bitcoin ever. So it uses cryptography. Yeah, that's right. But a lot of people talk about, like encrypted money and stuff like that. But that's just not the case. And the basic problem that Bitcoin solves is timing. And I think a lot of people just don't know that and don't realize that. And so they just get hung up in all kinds of shitcoinery in terms of looking into supply chain stuff and Internet of Things stuff and so on and so forth. And they all miss that you cannot connect the digital world with the physical world. And this is exactly what Bitcoin solved. So Bitcoin solved the Oracle problem and nothing, and like everyone who's working in cryptocurrency, quote unquote, doesn't understand it.
Yep. Super important distinction there, that the real world cannot be connected. So any cryptocurrency project trying to bring the blockchain to supply chain, it doesn't make any sense ultimately. And Gigi, I think that gets back to like the root problem that I fell into, and I think a lot of new coiners fall into, the flawed thinking, is that we apply the framework of new technology investment that has been the established wisdom after a half century of tech growth in the world and in Silicon Valley with hardware, and then eventually software and the internet, diversifying and betting on different projects and teams and all that. That's the winning formula, and that's been true in all tech investing until now. And I think that new coiners are likely to bring in that style of thinking, that idea about how to win when investing in a new technology. That's certainly what I did, and I guess it's our opportunity, it's our responsibility to try to point them in the right direction as soon as possible, and impart these memes of knowledge that Bitcoiners have started to focus in on, of absolute scarcity is the only thing that matters, and all of the other valuable Bitcoin memes, infinity divided by 21 million and all that's true, and it's for different reasons than anything that was true with the internet or with hardware or software before that. And I think that's the trap that new coiners fall into, but it's where we need to focus to try to steer them away from.
First of all, good points all around. I especially liked Gigi completely ignoring the freaks trying to have fun staying poor him while he was talking. Freaks, I was disappointed in you. I thought you had him there. I think, there's a couple things to unpack here. I think one of the big things, which Gigi mentioned, is that proof of work, I think, is like the real innovation here, and people distributed proof of work, verifiable proof of work is the real innovation here, and so many people miss that element. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, people should realize that I think every asset on Earth will trend to zero in terms of Bitcoin, not just altcoins. And so yes, like, before you make any kind of investment in general, like, you should, do your own research and figure things out. But I think for a lot of people, they won't have to get past that aspect. They don't know how our current money system works. If they hear that and they see over the next 5 years it continue to happen because it keeps happening, then they'll figure it out eventually. And last but not least, I think, there's a lot of talk about meme this, meme that, and it kind of tails back into pricing things in sats. How do we meme, sats the standard into being the standard? And I think, a good meme is based in reality to begin with. It's not like memes created this reality. Memes simply captured the reality before it was apparent to the mainstream, before it was apparent to everyone else. Sats were already the standard. The sats were already the ultimate unit of measurement for the whole world. It's just people hadn't realized it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you rightly point out, sats are actually the standard in Bitcoin. Like, the only sats exist in Bitcoin. Bitcoins don't really exist. Like, they only exist by convention. Only sats exist in the protocol, like at the base level, so to speak. And I think memes are in a way distilled truth. And if the distilled truth is somewhat offensive or funny or sticky, then all the better. And I also think that good memes are always organic. Like, the forced meme doesn't exist. It's just it just doesn't work. It doesn't seem to work that way. And I think memes are, in that sense, also shortcuts. And I think more and more people are taking these kind of shortcuts because most people just operate on following people that they trust. And now we have just some big names switching over to Bitcoin and saying, like, Bitcoin is here to stay, and Bitcoin is actually, like, it's it's not only for criminals, and it's not just tulips, and it's and so on and so forth. Like, we have actually outspoken critics that have changed their mind, and just all kinds of smart people telling you that Bitcoin is the future. And I think that's how more and more people will find their way into Bitcoin as well, because they will continue to ask themselves that all the smart and respected people, can they be wrong at the same time? Maybe, but maybe there's also something there that you take a second look. And to everyone who's listening to this, and I mean, I guess all the people that are listening, they are in the cult anyway, but just let me tell you, listening to maximalists is like the ultimate shortcut in cheat codes and understanding and everything else. Like, it's just, like we said before, it sounds stupid and it sounds too easy, but just, just stack. And if you think you're doing just listen to fucking American Hodl for that. Just if you have second thoughts, just stack harder. And I truly think, like, the best thing you can do is educate yourself, try to be productive, try to produce something that other people will actually pay you money for in whatever form. So in the end, you can earn sats, and just set up auto DCA until hyper-Bitcoinization is complete. And that won't be a very long time, I think. Like, I've repeated that over and over again. I think we will have
it's happening right now, right?
It's happening before our eyes, but I think
it has
somewhere in 2029, we will have an event that approximates, like, clear hyper-Bitcoinization in terms of, like, fiat currencies failing, stuff like that, circular economies forming so large that most online people are just on the Bitcoin standard, stuff like that. It's very hard to define, like, it's very hard to define the point of hyper-Bitcoinization, since it's kind of a process. It's like asking when did the internet win? When did the internet take over? It obviously took over, but there's still some people that aren't online. Like when did the fax machine die? I can't really tell you. There's still people that are using fax machines.
Yeah,
Fuck's sake, I don't know why.
Cruggy gets his Bitcoin price ticker through the fax. Gigi, when I asked you to introduce yourself, you gave like this really long-winded
Gigi's on fire today.
introduction. But I think ultimately, like if I was going to sum up, I think your most powerful aspect in this space is you're almost like a meme historian, like a Bitcoin meme historian. And I was like, I think this is like an interesting topic to bring up with you here live. I kind of embraced have fun staying poor innately within myself, not as like I think it's an hilarious dig at someone who's, a Bitcoin denier and attacking us. But I think ultimately have fun staying poor is like, that's the stay humble, stack sats lifestyle. That's like the Bitcoiner low time preference lifestyle, right? Where you have to, if you can have fun staying poor, then you can stack as many sats as possible. Then you've found the cheat code.
If you put this proactive activity, you're having fun staying poor by stacking sats.
Yeah. You know how the Great Reset people, they're like, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And I think, if you're doing it right in the Bitcoin space, then you will own nothing but Bitcoin and you will be happy. Like it's the best thing, like rent everything else and just buy Bitcoin. You can rent everything else. Don't rent your Bitcoin, people. It's just rent an apartment, sell your chairs, sell your cars. Cars are basically chairs on wheels, So yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there that, and there's a profound truth behind it, like Bitcoin is the only thing you can truly own, because in Bitcoin, it's not only that it's not even that possession is the rule of law. Like like they say possession is like 9/10 of the law, and if you own something, that's how you make sure it's yours. In Bitcoin, it's even like worse in kind of way. Knowledge is owning something. If you have knowledge of a certain kind of information, you own it, and it's very difficult to wrap your head around that, because can you really say that you own that you own knowledge? Like if let's say you have a private key and you transform it into 12 words, you have a seed phrase that's 12 words long. It's quite easy to remember 12 words. So the Bitcoin are now in your head, because that's basically, for all intents and purposes, these are your Bitcoin, because like Bitcoin don't really exist, but you have those 12 words. And you can share that with your family, for example. Like if you're really tight knit, I won't recommend it, but just as a thought experiment. So now you know these 12 words, and your wife knows these 12 words, and maybe your 2 kids know these 12 words. Who owns the Bitcoin? Like everyone does. It's the whole concept of property somewhat and owning something breaks down in Bitcoin if you think about it in that way, because owning is knowing and knowing is owning, and that's I think that's what makes Bitcoin so fascinating, because our laws just can't handle that. You will have to do some weird mental gymnastics to make our existing code of law work with that kind of system. And so I think it's just all kinds of exciting, and it's really possible in Bitcoin to have fun and not stay poor, because you can do what you want and have your wealth intact.
I mean, when the Bitcoin price runs up, I just like we have no choice. You either have to have fun staying poor, or we're just not gonna have fun, because we're definitely gonna stay poor regardless. Like you'll never have enough sats. Like it's impossible. You just have to try your best just to have fun staying poor.
Yeah, I made my peace. I made my peace with that quite a long while ago, I think, and maybe that can loop back also to like the shitcoin topic, because I got pulled into the shitcoins so hard. Like I was literally reading every white paper under the sun and tried to understand it all, and I like, you guys have no idea how much I was into it, and so I just made peace with that I would have, if I listened to my own advice that I'm giving now, and I would have listened to the maximalists and just went all in and just have been stacking like crazy, I would have way more sets than I do now. But in the end, nobody really has any sets, because we all like voting anyway, and that's just the way it goes. Bitcoiners lose the sets from time to time, and so I think be happy be happy that you're here, be happy that you're that early, and be happy that you can stack now, and be happy with the sets that you stack. And don't be too hard on yourself, even if you know, like a lot of people have shot themselves in the foot and burned keys and whatnot, or just messed up in some other way. And so, yeah, just as mental health advice, don't be too hard on yourself. And I'm sorry, Croesus. I just I didn't let you speak before, but in my defense, I'm kind of drunk and stuff.
That's all good, dude. No worries. Yeah, and you're spitting fire too, so it's all good. But yeah, there was a thought that I wanted to toss in there when Matt brought up a meme historian. I feel like I've had like a recent like growth in appreciation for like, it's sort of a joke, but like memes really are how we win, and not that like we come up with cooler graphics or anything like that, but like the distillation of the knowledge that takes a long time to learn into something that's easier to learn over time is how we broadcast and onboard the message to everybody, to the mainstream, to people who aren't in the habit of being really curious about new technology and actively learning about it. They're only going to listen when the meme is so simple and they're seeing other people around them benefit from taking the advice of that meme. So recently I wrote an article trying to compare Bitcoin adoption to what it looked like on the frontier of the American West, how the American West was developed over the last few hundred years. And in the process of that, I like, you know, there's sort of two main memes of advice for people in the 1800s about how to make the most of this new frontier and the opportunity there. One was "Go West, young man," which is sort of the encapsulation of everything, right? Like there's opportunity in the West, and that's where you should go if you want to make a better life. And that, I didn't know this, but that only was coined as a phrase in the 1860s. So that it took decades before the wisdom, the knowledge was synthesized into something as simple as that. This meme, "Go West, young man," took decades. And because of the internet, and because of Twitter, we have the advantage of so much more rapid idea exchange and iteration that Bitcoin Twitter can accelerate that synthesis of the value of adopting Bitcoin as your unit of account. And we're not done yet. And, you know, as those memes improve, we'll reach more and more people who in turn will propagate that knowledge to more and more people in their world. And that's how we win.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that memes kind of in a weird way are the language of the internet, because they're just so insanely condensed, you know, like image macros existed for a long time, and not too long ago, image macros were the only thing that was known as memes. Now everything is kind of a meme, like even short videos and stuff like that. Yeah, the memes are real. They always have been. And so I think I heard Bitstein talk about that, how memes are basically just supercharged rhetoric devices, and how it's just rhetoric on steroids. And I think that's really true. But for a good meme to stick and to spread, it also has, as Matt said before, it has to be true. You know, like there has to be not only a kernel of truth, it has to hit you in the head how true it is. Like money print of Burr, you know.
That's what the shitcoiners don't fucking realize, right? Yeah. Is like you have these ETH heads on Twitter, and they're like, well, Bitcoin's a meme coin, and they're trying to force their own memes, you know, like DeFi and like money Legos and shit. But like the whole, like 21 million, this idea of a supply cap exists because it's so hard to change it. It's both socially difficult to change it, and as a technology, it's been prioritized to allow people to self verify and use their own nodes. and it gives people basically the ability to veto any kind of radical changes, right, and verify it themselves. It's not because people keep saying 21 million over and over again. That is the culmination. This is the meme is the explanation of something that already exists. You can't. The meme doesn't create the reality. It is the reality.
Yeah, it just communicates it better. And I guess
absolutely.
The core idea, like, I think it's funny how the internet has forgotten where the idea of meme comes from. It was a word that was invented or applied by Richard Dawkins, I think, in one of his books. I think it might have been The Selfish Gene.
Yeah.
To put a label on this idea that genes are information that are and they propagate themselves, and they want to be propagated, and so the meme is that base unit of information that the gene carries, and so yeah, when we think about internet memes with that lens of it's the base unit of information that can be propagated, that's what we're trying to get towards.
Yeah, and to dig even deeper into that, I think it just goes way deeper, and I think there's a deeper reason why it works so well in Bitcoin in particular, and I also think this is the reason for so many also cult and religious parallels in Bitcoin. That you rightly pointed out that this was coined by Dawkins, who obviously took inspiration from genes and how living organisms, like how genes spread, but not only genes are spreading, but also in humans, certain ideas are spreading and are mutating and are useful or not useful. And if they are not useful, then also the meme won't survive. And he was talking in the context of religions and other things and other ideas. And I really like also the framework that Harari put into place. It was the first time, at least when I saw that, he was like that money is a meme as well. Like he was saying that money is a religion pretty much. But those are all like informational constructs that people use to coordinate and to agree on reality and stuff like that. And so Bitcoin is the ultimate meme, like Bitcoin is pure information. It's just information. And it is self-replicating information as well. Like it is the absolute ultimate meme machine. And that's just how it operates. That's how it works. Bitcoin is the de facto meme machine. And I think that's why it also lends itself so well for memes. And I mean, there are deeper reasons to that as well. I think, in a way that the mind virus also replicates. And as we talked before, you can't really take possession of your Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can definitely take possession of you. And so in a way, like we're Bitcoin lives in us, and we're the hosts that spread it, and we spread it through the most effective means, which are memes and so on and so forth. Yeah. So I think anyone who's kind of interested in that should check out these books and make up his own mind. What's it all about in meme and gene land.
So discussing memes and things being priced in sats, I mean, should the children of the world be upset with their parents and their grandparents if they were gifted dollars that are just keep collapsing since Christmas? Like, should there be a children uprising here?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're getting cuck bucks for Christmas, what's going on with that?
Yeah, there's this ethical moral dilemma of like, once you have learned about Bitcoin, is it ethical to not propagate that knowledge to your children or to your friends and family? And it's everybody's responsibility to do that once they've learned. So the fact that children are being given dollars for Christmas and watching those dollars melt in value is not the fault of their parents who don't know, but it is wrong of the parents who do know. So it's interesting how that the arrow of Bitcoin adoption goes in one direction.
I mean, I assume most Bitcoiners are incessantly annoying to their children and are giving them sats, have been giving them sats for Christmas for a while now. And I have a feeling their children's views on it during bear markets were less agreeable than they are now.
Very true. Yeah, I guess
But
children are the ultimate short time preference individuals because they've only lived so long and they can only think so far out.
but luckily we have good tools now in terms of indoctrinating your children. Like we have Xamarin and children's books and all kinds of things that are actually fun also during bear markets. But I like what Chris has said before, that stacking sats is like a one-way street. I really like to think that, and I think that's also a meme that people need to wrap their head around, and that's very difficult for most people in my experience to understand that this is the end game. Like switching your viewpoint from pricing in dollars to pricing in sats. That's so insanely difficult because most people that have been caught up in the quote unquote cryptocurrency craze of 2017, they were like, how can I maximize my dollar gains? They were never like, how can I maximize my gains in sats? And once you start to switch, things are getting really different. And I think understanding that stacking sats is a one-way street is kind of the end goal of a long journey. And I'm afraid, like I'm not. We've been talking about memes and shortcuts and all kinds of things, and I'm afraid that there isn't really a good shortcut. It's kind of like it's kind of like your grandparents spreading a lot of wisdom, but you don't really believe them. You have to live your life. You have to make the mistakes on your own. Like if you would have only listened to your grandparents, then you would probably be in a way better place because they're actually kind of smart and have good advice and know what they're doing. And they might not be the best in explaining it well, but I think it's because you're not receptive. You're not receptive to the ideas. And I think the same is true for like shitcoiners and no-coiners, that they are not able to hear the truth of the maximalists because they're not ready to receive these kind of ideas, and they're not ready to see the truth for what it is. And I think a lot of people just have to go through these natural cycles and just experience it and learn it for themselves. Like as you say, Matt, all the time, it's like everyone has to touch the stove at least once. Like that's usually how it goes.
A lot more than once, and for a lot more things than Bitcoin. I mean, pretty much every way I've learned about everything is just fucking myself, and then learning from it, especially in Bitcoin. My history of my Bitcoin learning is just burning myself over and over and over again and learning in the process. We have a question here from a good friend of the podcast and text-based host 6102 Bitcoin. Should newcomers go all in with savings, then DCA with their income, or just DCA from the start? When he says DCA, he means dollar cost averaging, colloquially known as stacking sats.
So I'm dealing with this question from my my MBA classmates and former colleagues right now who are all of a sudden interested at 30,000 and they ignored me at 10,000 and before. And yeah, it's an impossible question, I guess, because it's up to everybody's risk tolerance, but not really risk tolerance. It's up to their conviction. You can only put in as much as you feel comfortable with, and the maximum that you are comfortable with is directly correlated to your level of knowledge. So the more you learn, the more you are comfortable holding a greater percentage of your total net worth in Bitcoin. And what's amazing to me is how the people that I've been talking to recently view any small percentage of Bitcoin as a risk, and as a Bitcoiner, the risk to me is so you're telling me you have 100% of your net worth in dollars or that financial system. Well, isn't that riskier? So in my mind, it's like, what percentage of your net worth can you get comfortable with shifting into this other asset class and then start DCAing? But it's just so hard to get them, off zero at all. But take what you can get, I guess.
I mean, I think it's an interesting idea, right? Because I think for Bitcoiners, right, like when we have extra dollars, we feel like that's too risky. It's almost too risky to not have Bitcoin. I've been playing around with that framing on Twitter, for instance, and the other day, I sent out a tweet That was basically that framing. Was it's honestly, I just don't have the conviction to buy dollars with my sats. It's just too risky for me. But at the same time, you have the overwhelming majority of people who, whether for good reason or not, they feel the opposite, right? And there's going to be like a turning point at some point where there's going to be massive change, because those people are going to come around onto the extreme side. Because I feel like once you start stacking, there's really no going back. From that point on, you're just increasing and increasing and increasing, and you just can't get enough. One thing here that I think people miss is like if you look back at any point in history, the price was cheaper than it is today. It's easy to say when you're sitting at all-time highs, like, oh, I should have went all in at any point, literally any point before now, and then continued stacking from there. But I think the cool part about staying humble and stacking sats, and that staying humble part is key, is because so many people have an issue with getting in the door. They come in, they start paying attention to stuff, and they're like, oh, I'm going to wait for hyperwave. I'm going to wait till 2,500 till it falls down a little bit. Or even now, like people are like, I'm going to wait till it falls under 30 and then I'm going to go all in. The nice thing about stacking from the beginning is that it's an easy decision for someone to make. It's an easy decision for someone to say, okay, instead of wasting $10 or $15 on cigarettes per day, I'm going to put that into Bitcoin. And if I lose it, I lose it, so they can actually get in. So maybe really what it looks like in practice, I mean, everyone's different, is you kind of come in on a small DCA, and then like a couple months into that, you get some massive FOMO, and then you practically go all in, and then you continue to stack from there. Like that's probably the more realistic scenario.
So I have a very strong opinion in regards to that question, because like a lot of Bitcoiners have different approaches to that. But my advice especially to new people, but pretty much to everyone, but especially to like complete no coiner newbies, to like I don't know, my sister or whatever, is just start stacking sats today. Just start now. Just don't think about it. Just please trust me, believe me. Just start now, set it up. Even if you have no idea what you're doing, just find a way to get your feet wet, and just the best thing is to start stacking. The best thing is to do, like I send people to auto DCA services straight away. Like, and it's the best thing, because I think especially if you have a little bit of money, let's say you're well off and you want to put in like 30K or 50K or something into Bitcoin. The ways you can fuck up are like, there are a million ways you can fuck up. So it's really easy to mess something up, to completely get wrecked, like to lose all your money, to of course destroy your privacy forever, to shoot yourself in the foot, to do just there are a million ways, a million things you can do wrong, and then nobody can help you. So even if you're technically proficient, this can happen, because if you're smart, and if you're a technical guy, and if you're in IT or something, then you might think it's a good idea to build your own, scheme setup, whatever security setup, and you might split your seed and encrypt something, and store your passwords in your head because you're so smart. And again, all your money is gone. Like that's just the way it is. And so I think that the best way is get some exposure. If you can, just start auto DCA and learn as you go. If you mess up, you haven't lost much. As you said, just give up a bad habit, like quit smoking, and put the money you would usually spend for cigarettes into DCA, and just learn as you go, and upgrade as you need. Like upgrade your setup, upgrade your security, upgrade your best practices. Then start to get into running nodes, for example, get a hardware wallet, stuff like that. And you cannot learn everything at once. And I also think you cannot do everything right at once. Of course, that's for individuals. That's for like people that want to learn about Bitcoin, want to get some exposure and so on. The story is different if you're a company and you just do everything custodial, and you're just like, let's allocate 20 million to Bitcoin, and someone will take care of it. But that's not really Bitcoin. You're actually not holding Bitcoin. And I think you can't go wrong with that approach. And as you become more comfortable, you can think of hitting your goal earlier. And I think it's also important to understand that FOMO is just horrible. Like if you think now is the only time to get in, that's just take a step back and take a deep breath. And if you're not calm, then you're bound to make mistakes. That's just if you're just FOMOing in and you have to get in now, you're bound to mess something up. And so my advice is just start small, start DCAing, and just try to also understand what you're going and take it step by step. And a second thing I want to point out is I saw a couple of people, and I also in some sense know a little bit from experience. If you go too much all in, so to speak, it's very easy to end up in a impossible situation. Like let's say, oh yeah, a new bull market is incoming, I'm gonna go all in, and then I'm up 200%, and now I'm gonna quit my job and do whatever, and then the market tanks and you're down 90% and you're forced to sell at the very bottom because you have to eat. That's not a good situation to be in. So just try to be smart about it.
That's why the stay humble part's super important, because none of us are going to be humble. It's so, like, when this thing goes crazy, when Bitcoin hits open water and just going fucking insane, it is really fucking difficult to stay humble. And when the price is collapsing and you're in a bear cycle, and everyone's saying Bitcoin's dead, it's really hard to stay humble and be acquiring at that point, right? And so you constantly just need to be introspective of yourself, I think, just in life in general, but especially in Bitcoin.
And I've said that before, like, I think the best decision in my life was to get into Bitcoin. And that was not really a decision. It was kind of like Bitcoin ate me alive. But the best decision in my Bitcoin life was just don't think about it. Stop looking at price charts and everything and just do auto DCA. Like it's pure Bitcoin Zen. I can't recommend it enough.
It's the best thing ever.
Like I never look at, just stop looking at fucking charts. Stop looking at the price even. Like my price indicator is just memes, Like,
so let's talk about this. Let's talk about this for a second, right? So auto DCA, auto stacking, fuck DCA. DCA is what boomers do. We're auto stackers, okay? Yeah. Auto stacking is if you're working a fiat job, and you're getting your fiat paycheck into your fiat bank account, you can convert a portion of that into Bitcoin, into sats, on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. This is what I've been doing this whole cycle, because it didn't really exist as an option earlier.
Yeah.
And it just completely takes you pick your percentage, right? I guess this is like the way people should look at it, right? Like, I guess you subtract your take home versus your expenses, and then you have this cushion area, right? And you decide what percent of that you're going to contribute, right? And I personally like daily, but let's be honest, like if it's a smaller amount, you're going to pay a higher percentage in fees. So it kind of makes sense to do weekly, but daily just feels productive as fuck. Like, it's amazing waking up in the morning and just being like, ooh, I have more sats.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that brings in like a distinction that I think is worth making here. I think that's totally the approach for when you already have good exposure to Bitcoin. But for somebody like with zero exposure who has significant net worth, I think there's an upfront period where they need to be either stacking aggressively or do some sort of lump sum to get off zero. But like Matt, as you said before, it's totally true that it's so hard to, here's Matt, so hard to commit to that. And it's easier if it's, just.
But that's the problem. Yeah, the problem is they don't have the balls to fucking do it, and they haven't played around with Bitcoin yet, so they're not even in a comfortable position of controlling their own keys and holding their Bitcoin. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're not holding your own Bitcoin, you haven't bought any Bitcoin yet. And I think it's you need to be careful about buying a lump sum before you really understand the asset and have used it. At the same time, we are in a historical cycle where we've had these historical cycles that look relatively similar every fucking time. And what happens is when we breach these all-time highs after a halving and you go into open water Bitcoin, we tend to have massive upside. And even when it corrects back down, you don't get near that previous all-time high level, right? So there's something to be said here about, in this specific time, trying to get aggressively off zero if you haven't already. But I mean, really, the ideal is to not be in this fucking situation. Like, if you have no sats right now, what the fuck did you do over these last couple of years? Like, what the fuck was going on there?
The thing I'm seeing with my my MBA friends is that they have 0% Bitcoin, and their instinct is to dip a toe and wait a year, see how it performs for a year. But if you do that, then you miss out on what's happening, what's coming. And this sort of happened for me of like, it's hard for me to move the needle that much more on the sats that I have versus like if I had just bought a little bit more up front. Because as when you're in for a cycle, then it 10x is 10x harder to stack the same amount of sats. So I think dipping a toe can be the wrong like instinct because of the like time sensitivity of Bitcoin when it starts to run, when it's in price discovery here.
Yeah, but I think that's just always true and will always be. Like, you will never be able to move the needle of your past purchases. If you zoom out enough, it's going to be an exponential trend all the way until everything is said and done. So that's just the nature of this game. That's just the way it's going to be. And I understand the what I would call the Robert Breedlove approach, because he has been outlining that quite well in terms of if you have enough cash on the side, buy lump sum and DCA later, so to speak. But again, I think it also has its own risks, because you want to time your entry. The larger your sum, the more inclined you are to trade like cycles to
and then
find
the
a better
price
entry
drops.
and so on.
The price drops 5K or something, and you freak the fuck out.
Let me just tell you, all of that is bullshit. Like, just if you have a lot of money, just take that money and do auto DCA with that as well. Like let's say you have 30K. Okay, then just pick any month and put in 1,000. Like, put in 1K every day. Then your whole stash is done. And if you still have a fiat job and you can I don't know, you can afford to put in 25% of your paycheck, just do that and live your life as normal and never look at the price chart again. And just do that until 2029, and you can thank me later. And that's just the cheat code. And if you don't believe me, then just HFSP. Like, yeah, exactly.
No, like, yeah, you can. That's what people don't realize. Like, you can flex your stack, like the amount you stack. You can, in the beginning, you can do a higher amount when you buy in your original position, and then you can lower it over time. So we have a couple questions in the comments that I want to hit here. First of all, someone said there's no auto stacking option in Europe. Gigi's the European. I know GetBidder used to exist. It doesn't anymore. I'm an advisor for BottlePay with a small equity stake, and they're like in the testing phase right now. They're about to hit the App Store with their own auto stack service. And I believe Strike is about to launch in Europe. So those are two options. Gigi, do you have another option for anyone that's trying to auto stack in Europe?
Yeah, there are actually 3 that I'm aware of, and there might be more even. The one that I recommend from time to time is Relay. They're Swiss-based. You have to check with your bank. Sometimes like ridiculous transfer fees occur because you're transferring from European Union area to Switzerland, and that's good. Like, that's proper DCA. There's like, I would say they are good people. They have a horrible shitcoin PhD advisor on board, but they said on Twitter that they will be always Bitcoin only, and so far that has been true. So that's good. There's X sats. I haven't used it myself yet, but that looks okay-ish as well. It's rather new. There are some exchanges that do DCA. There is one in Austria that's called Bitpanda. I think it's available in Europe in general, and you can set your auto DCA savings plan there as well. And what I personally would recommend, if you have a Kraken account, like the thing with DCA is it's always, up to now, it's still always bound to KYC. And that's just something, I think this problem will be solved somehow in the future, but for now, you will have to go through KYC.
But the problem is solved by your boss paying you under the table in fucking sats.
Yeah, of course. Like that's the ideal, but most people aren't there yet. Relay has same as Bitter, like light KYC. They only have your bank information. You don't have to actually, like give up a stool sample and scan in your passport and stuff like that. And there is also what I would recommend if you have an account on Kraken already, and you have a Raspberry Blitz, then the best thing to do is install the Raspberry Blitz Kraken Stacking Sats plugin, and that was written by a friend of mine, Dennis Ryman. And it basically is just a cron job that uses the Kraken API to stack for you. So you top up your Kraken account, and you just have some fiat in your Kraken account, and it just takes from there, and it just stacks like every minute if you want to. So all of those options are awesome, and so you can do weekly, daily, and even like every minute, and can DCA in Europe like no problem. And someone pointed out in the chat, maybe it's good to hit on that as well, that everyone should go Bisq. And I agree with the sentiment, and it would be great. I think we will have that at some point in the future, just like, we had Lightning was very hard to use in a non-custodial way, and now it isn't. And mixing also, like now we have Join Market, and everything goes into this better UX non-custodial direction. And I don't think there is a reason why you can't have, very similar to Join Market, like a bot or something that uses Bisq, and you basically do auto DCA operations, and you just take care of what needs to be done and power through a queue to just authorize payments or whatever. I think that can come in the future, but for now it's just not possible to do. But what I would like to stress to everyone who's listening to this is the psychological benefits of auto DCA cannot be overstated. Like, just the difference between hitting a button and forcing yourself to stand up and buy daily or buy weekly, and then price shoots up like 50%. Are you gonna do your weekly buy? No, of course you're not, because you're a human being and you're like, oh no, now the price is too high, I'm gonna wait 2 days, and so on and so forth. Like, it cannot be overstated how great psychologically auto DCA is. And I think still most Bitcoiners miss that, because there's so many people that just don't auto DCA yet. And once you switch, I think there's just no going back.
So, yeah, I mean, fuck yes. Thank you, Gigi. That was a great, really great insight there. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think what a key thing here is, like, so KYC is this idea is they take all this personal information for you. They take it's when they take your ID, and they take your mailing address, and maybe passport information, all this different information. They take it from you, and they report it to their local regulators, and they store it, and they tie that to all your Bitcoin addresses. And this is very dangerous, especially dangerous if you're not using it with CoinJoin. And it's a trusted relationship. It's a trusted relationship where you're trusting that organization with your private information. You're trusting anyone that they're sharing it with. All that said, I personally strongly believe that everyone should avoid KYC services, except the one time where I think it's tolerable and it's not ideal. Obviously, it's not ideal. Is if you're converting your KYC paycheck into Bitcoin automatically, and that's because it's already KYC'd. It's sitting in your KYC bank account already, and it might as well just go through another KYC service, a single KYC service that you trust the most. You just leave it to a single one, and it just comes into Bitcoin, and then you immediately coin join. And I think that's like a decent enough trade-off balance there. And then on top of that, you could have your separate KYC free stack that you stack through Bisq. And just because I fucking love the project, I just want to show a quick video on Bisq before we jump back into the discussion. So enjoy.
There are many places to buy Bitcoin. They collect your personal information and jeopardize your privacy. KYC is the illicit activity. Bisq is open source. It does not collect user data. You keep your private keys, create or take offers to trade peer-to-peer, and keep your Bitcoin private and secure.
So that's Bisq. Check it out.
I want to point out one thing to defend my position, that I think that all of that will come, like non-KYC, auto stacking and stuff like that. Just keep in mind what's just said in this video is more profound than it seems, because they said that Bisq is open source. And the thing about open source, free and open source software is it doesn't die, it doesn't go away. That's also why Bitcoin just doesn't die and won't go away. BISC, like what you have to understand is that BISC will outlive every single company that you can mention in the Bitcoin space right now. BISC will outlive Coinbase. It will just outlive all of it. That's why open source is winning, and that's why free software is winning. And so the sooner you understand that, the sooner you also realize that the way forward is with services like that. And the more like exposure you get to something like that early, it's like, I'm getting into Linux in the 90s or something like that. Like Linux is still around, and most operating systems and other things are just not around. It's just the way that this kind of these kind of things work. So that's something to keep in mind. And sorry for the philosophical rant. I'm just, the whiskey is talking. It's not me.
Crow, what's your opinion? I feel like we're overpowering you.
I have less strong feelings about KYC. I sort of, I view it as a basically inevitable part of reaching the mainstream. But Gigi's point here about open source wins certainly has been bearing out, and I hope that it goes in that direction. And I frankly haven't used non KYC services to acquire Bitcoin because it's intimidating to me. I'm not that technical of a person. It's kind of a miracle that I'm in Bitcoin at this point, this early as it is, because I come at it from more of a business numbers, big picture thinking point of view, and have less mastery of the technical side. So I haven't used that stuff, and I don't really know how much I'm missing in terms of its importance. But I would like to use it because everybody else seems to think it's so important. But it's too intimidating for me still. So if BISC and other open source things, continue to improve and build on previous open source iterations, then that sounds great.
Yeah, I think what you said about DCA being inevitable is very, very true, because if we continue to be right about these things, Bitcoin will just continue on its trajectory. And it doesn't even matter if this is the last cycle, like some crazy macro guys are talking about, or if it just continues to go up and down and up and down. And we have this bullet bear hype cycles.
Cycle.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is. It's so ridiculous that, nobody was taking me seriously 1.5 years ago when I was saying 2029, maybe hyper Bitcoinization, stuff like that. And now I'm the bearish one that is
it's so annoying. They outbull us, it's like it used to be profound that we could be like, Bitcoin's designed to pump forever, and now fucking Scott Maynard is saying the same exact fucking thing, and my dad's like, oh well, Scott has a point,
It's hyper Bitcoinization tomorrow, but it's I think you said this as well, Matt. It's like if you're living through your first proper bull cycle, then it feels like it's going to be hyper Bitcoinization now. I think almost every Bitcoiner.
It feels like every cycle. It's going to feel like at this cycle at some point. I haven't hit my personal point where I think that yet, but I know at some point I'm going to be like, hyper Bitcoinization is upon us. This is the last cycle, and then we will probably dump shortly after that.
And that's a function of just capturing the next incremental slice of the adoption curve, and it feels infinite at that point in time. But you've only just captured, the next set of people that are potentially open to the idea of Bitcoin and are, interested enough that the FOMO pulls them in for that cycle, and then 4 years later, you capture the next incremental slice, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in terms of DCA, we are still at a point where most of the world is forced to use fiat. And if you're forced to use fiat and forced to earn fiat, I mean, in a way, like you're forced to earn fiat by society, most people won't pay you in sats. It's just too complicated, too much of a hassle. There are some people like Max Hildebrand, for example, and others that live on a pure Bitcoin standard and just like earn sats and nothing else pretty much, and spend sats and so on. But that's just, like that's the minority of the minority. And I think DCA will be with us all throughout this process of Bitcoinization. And just if you're early and you understand Bitcoin early, then you will save in sats, because sats are the best savings technology, and you're still earning in fiat, and then you're converting a certain percentage to sats, and that's just your savings vehicle. What I think will be interesting is we will see reverse DCA as well. I think we will definitely see that. I think we saw that already. Bitcoin is doing that Bitcoin just pumped so hard, and you managed to save so many sats that you're just like, okay, I'm set, and I'm gonna buy a nice house or a small island or a boat or what have you, and Bitcoin is gonna pay my allowance. So you're basically reverse DCA out of it, because maybe you're renting a place on some island.
You're wrong, Gigi. That's a poor take.
You think so? I think you will be forced. I think you will be forced to use fiat for a long time.
No, wrong.
So you think everyone will move to a Citadel island, and it will just be circular economy from there on out?
I think we're going to move to sats being the preferred method of receiving payment quicker than anyone can really fathom. I mean, I think as an American, I witnessed this as a child. I mean, I would go to other countries, and we kind of didn't, if you didn't want to be a dick, you should probably convert your money ahead of time. But if you're an American and you're traveling, it's not as much the case now, especially not in Europe. You used to be able to just, if you pulled out a greenback, it was preferable. You almost would get a better price than if you paid them in their local currency. You could get a better conversion rate if you just paid directly in that better money. And Bitcoin is obviously the better money. So how long till it takes for the majority to realize that? And I think there's a turning point here where it's not nearly as long as people think it is. So maybe like if you're a high time preference whore and you're trying to get out of sats in the next 5 years, then maybe okay, then there's some room for that. But I think past that, like you're just going to be paying for things in sats, baby.
I just love that you called me a high time preference whore.
I said if you were to be one. I said if you were to be one. It was not a direct statement.
I mean, I agree. Like I think it can happen way quicker than most people think, and I like the American perspective of like everyone would just pay take your dollars because that's how the world works. As a poor European pleb that still remembers like shitcoins like the Italian lira, man. I don't know that. It's just I don't know good money. I didn't grow up with good money. So yeah, you might be right. I think you will be very right in cyberspace. I think we see that already. Like we see projects like Citadel 21, for example. They have a circular economy already. Like everyone who did something for them got paid in sats, like those people that got paid, and they only sell their stuff for sats. We will see that in the Bitcoin space. Like I think we will see that continue, and I think that will spread out quickly. Like if you're selling digital things, digital goods, or like for God's sakes, like if you're a cam girl or a gamer or someone who just takes tips and so on, I think the centralized platforms, because of censorship, will die, and I think that people will just take sats directly. So
the Huddle Depot, welcome to what American exceptionalism feels like, Gigi.
Awesome.
You're on the right side this time, Gigi. So I agree with everything you guys are saying, but I think it's just so much earlier. Like I think from the vantage point of a Bitcoiner, it doesn't feel that early, but it's so much earlier than we realize. Because so like I want to poll Matt and Gigi. How many Bitcoin maximalists, or put a different way, how many people in the world view Bitcoin as their unit of account, like today? How many do you think we're at?
There's like dozens of us.
Yeah, dozens. There's a nice gift.
I get a little bit ashamed or self-conscious when I get particularly drunk on some of these podcasts. But I think I think that's where it really shows if sats are a unit of count or not. If you can just drunkenly rattle off Sats conversions, and that's where you default to. Like that's where unit of count gets stable in the minds of many is when they're drunken and about, and that's what they're thinking in.
My problem is that for the longest time, like even with the drop down to 3.8K or what it was, my anchor was 10K. And I'm afraid my anchor for the set conversion will remain 10K until we hit 100K. So I'm still at 10K. So that's my quick set conversion.
My anchors are like, they move at the hard numbers. So actually there's I did a special with Bitcoin Magazine for proof of keys for Bitcoin's 12th birthday. And I'm interviewing, I was just really having a free flowing conversation with Wiz and Catan, and we passed 30K for the first time ever. And in that conversation, you can see it on the block clock, but I had no idea that we had passed 30K. But I was already rattling off my Sats conversions in that conversation based on 30K. Like once we hit like 26K, I moved up to 30. You know, it's
Nice,
like
nice.
you have to keep. I move with the hard numbers because I mean, otherwise, like the math is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not gonna do it on anything less than a 10K change.
Yeah, you know, like that's a side effect, I guess. Not looking at the price. It's just as long as my sats on their own do their little NGU, and every day I have a small amount of sats more, then that's good. That's a good day, you know. And my block clock only shows the block time because that's all that matters. As long as blocks are coming in, everything is dandy and sunny in cyberspace. And we're now at 664,696. There you go. And so I think, you know, the sat conversion, I think Bitcoin has to settle down a little bit for that to work for more people. And
why does Bitcoin need to settle down? The dollar is too volatile. The dollar should settle down in Sats terms.
Yeah, the dollar should just go away, and then we can just stick with Sats.
Have you guys looked at the M1 or M2 chart recently? The number of dollars in circulation.
Yeah, it looks like the Weimar hyperinflation chart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the hockey stick chart. Yeah, I think, you know, we're in for a wild ride, and I think 2021 will be a fun year for Bitcoiners and a year full of pain for most people. So yeah, Bitcoiners and contillionaires will profit, I guess, and everyone else won't. So I think it's very hard to, again, as Matt said as well, it's so hard to stay humble, but I think just economically speaking, in the macro landscape, and just with everything that happened because of Corona and lockdowns, I think it's gonna be ugly. And I think, you know, it's the stuff that I'm struggling with the most is that I think we're still living in peacetime, and I have the feeling that, you know, it just up to now, even with all the civil wars and other things, Bitcoin kind of had a somewhat, I would say, smooth ride in a way. You know, like there was not a full on war on Bitcoiners or on Bitcoin. And I think Seyfedin has interesting opinions on that as well, because he mentions that it might be like just maybe there won't be any war coming, and it would just be a gradual opting out of the fiat system and a gradual adoption of the Bitcoin standard, and that would be very beautiful in a way. But it's also hard to tell what kind of side effects that would bring, because I would say the transition to the internet, like, you know, the death of the newspapers and of other traditional media and print media, it kind of happened gradually, I would say, but it wasn't without its side effects. So what keeps me up at night sometimes is just thinking about potential side effects, and also thinking about a potential like nation state attack and a war on Bitcoin on Bitcoiners coming.
Yeah.
But can we, like, I mean, the way we started this conversation was Crow asking how many people are pricing in Sats, and I jokingly said dozens, but like, let's be realistic, like less than 1,000, right?
Yeah.
And like, if we're talking about how many Bitcoiners are using their own full node, it's like max in the tens of thousands probably, right? And we're talking about how many people are using CoinJoin, like what? It's like probably in a similar range, maybe a little bit less than that. Self-custody, what are we at self-custody? Like maybe 1 million, 2 million?
There are
I think that
2 million addresses with 0.1 Bitcoin.
Right, and it's less than that. That's an upper limit,
Hmm.
right?
So less than 3 million.
Because like I have multiple addresses, people have multiple addresses.
Yeah, I mean, I so for one of my tweet threads, I did this exercise of like, what are we at in terms of progress of adoption through the S curve for the different like levels of Bitcoin adoption, which is to say, like, at first somebody might own $20 worth of Bitcoin, and that counts by some metrics. Some people say like, oh, there's like 150 million people who own digital assets, and that's really what they're capturing is people who have like play money in it. And then there's people who have like a 1% hedge. There's people who have like a significant position of like 10 or 20%, and then there's people who have like over 50%. And when I tried to like walk through the exercise of what's like a reasonable number for that final group, I came up with like at most, and it's probably well under this number, but I came up with 250,000 people have reached the point where the majority of their money is in Bitcoin, which means that we're at like 0.01% penetration of the eventual total adoption. It's so early that it's impossible for me to imagine everyone else figuring it out even in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I agree somewhat, but I think people are also, not everyone has to figure it out, like not everyone understands the internet who is using the internet, and you also have to think in terms of infrastructure inversion. Like there was a point in time, I always call it the voice over IP moment, where most phones in the developed world switched to voice over IP and just are using the internet underneath, but they still work the same way and look the same way. And I think the same will be true in Bitcoin as well. Like the internet just gobbled everything up. It ate everything up exponentially that has to do with information. And I think Bitcoin will eat everything up that has to do with value and money and the transfer of money and settlement of money and so on and so forth. And I think Bitcoin's voice over IP moment is coming, and I think that will be a huge boost. I think the whole adoption S curve, and if you're interested in that, Skybridge brought out a great report very recently. They have this adoption S curve in it as well.
The Mooches Fund, Scaramouche's Fund?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was literally just a deck full of Bitcoin Twitter memes.
Yeah, it was. It's great. It's very accurate. Like it has a lot of distilled truth.
My people are going to show up in Bitcoin and see opportunity and project themselves as experts. So that's what the MBAs will do. We're coming, and it's not going to be very appreciated by.
That's fine. As long as they're shilling the corn, that's fine.
I love when they come in and pump my bags. You know?
That's the right mentality. Yeah.
And in this report, they also have like this S curve analysis, potential adoption analysis, and I think they said, and we see this S curve graphs all the time, and I think we're still before on most. The stuff that I see, we're still before the early adopters. The early adopters started, I don't know, 6.9% or something.
We're still in the very first part of the earliest group.
So we're still innovator stage. And in the Skybridge report, I think they only took the American market and they picked a number like 10%, 10% of Americans in 2020 own Bitcoin somehow. And so what they see is that in 2029, which is my hyper-Bitcoinization prediction date as well, 90% of Americans are projected to own Bitcoin. And I think the voice over IP moment, like the infrastructure inversion, like the news came out, I think yesterday or today in the morning or something, that banks are now allowed to settle in Bitcoin and use Bitcoin, like use open blockchains for settlement. I think that was the language used. And when that happens, the same thing that happened with the telephones will happen. Like everyone is still using their kind of cards and smartwatches and whatnot to pay, and just everything will work as normal. But there will be a lot of demand for block space underneath just for settlement, and that will change everything. And suddenly you have an insane bull market, and you have an insane S curve. And this large adoption S curve is made up of smaller S curves, and those are the cycles that we see. And at some point in time, it doesn't make sense anymore to measure these cycles in dollars, and that's, I think, when it makes sense to speak of the breaking point of it, like a hyper Bitcoinization point.
Good points. I just want to, first of all, someone mentioned in the comments that we should just, if you're a new Bitcoiner out there and you're using something like Robinhood or Revolut that doesn't allow you to withdraw your Bitcoin, you should immediately use another platform. That they're not actually selling Bitcoin. PayPal as well. They're not actually selling Bitcoin. If you can't withdraw, then there's no point. Ultimately, even if you're not going to withdraw right away, the goal should be to withdraw eventually and take custody yourself and control your own money. Otherwise, you don't have that value prop. You can get locked out of your funds. So just be aware of that. The second thing is, you mentioned this OCC news. Jack Blatchford actually asked us about 40 minutes ago about it, and I did want to circle back to it. So just to all the freaks out there in the audience, don't get discouraged. You know, if you keep hitting us with questions, we will hopefully discuss them here. So do you think this is bullish, Gigi? You made it seem like this is very bullish. To me, it was kind of a non-story. Am I wrong?
I don't know. Like, it's very hard for me to answer if that is bullish or not. Like, in a sense, everything is good for Bitcoin, and the way I see it is that there's like, first of all, Bitcoin doesn't care. It really doesn't matter. And you can decide how you want to interact with Bitcoin and how you use it. And Bitcoin's fundamentals haven't changed. Bitcoin's value proposition hasn't changed. And if you're like an AdCap Bitcoiner in the circular economy, this doesn't phase you at all. But in terms of adoption and in terms of gaining legitimacy, it might be, you know, like, it's very hard to be an investor that said for the last 5 years that Bitcoin is only for people that do illegal things. And, you know, like, that's kind of true now, because now banks use it and they're doing all kinds of illegal things. But you get my point, you know, like, I don't think it's a non-story. We will see what comes next, because it's
shitcoiner news. I think, yes, everything's good for Bitcoin, but you know, as someone who does this show and does a weekly news show on Bitcoin, I think Bitcoiners would be pretty bored if I just told them every news story, just, oh, this is good for Bitcoin. Yeah, there's different degrees. And I think this is a shitcoin story. I think this is, you know, so-called stable coins. And, you know, these are short-term things. I think banks integrating Bitcoin is an inevitability. But I don't, a self-sovereign Bitcoin user gives two shits.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think in the next coming years, we will see all kinds of bullshit in terms of, you know, like, digital euros and digital dollars and just central bank, quote unquote, blockchain money and all that kind of shit. All of that is going to come. Like, we saw just individuals coming up with their own spin on shitcoins in 2017, and it got more sophisticated over the years. And now we're gonna have like nation states and central banks do it, and that's gonna be bad. A lot of people will lose a lot of money, and a lot of people will just miss out on Bitcoin because of it. But I also think, you know, just like 2017 was kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a necessity or something, but it's kind of inevitable in an open system. And I think we will just need to clean away this sludge that's going to happen. And Bitcoin will be fine, I think. Bitcoin will survive all that. And I believe that Bitcoin will survive all that because it is built for survival. And shitcoins are not built for survival, and they're just built to enrich a small group of people. And it doesn't matter who is behind the shitcoin. So in the end, I think things are going to be fine. And just you know, let the next shitcoin wave wash over you, and just keep stacking and keep being productive, and ignore the shitcoin news as much as you can.
So, Matt, I think the OCC news is a big deal. Not actually like for any direct reason, and I totally agree that more than anything, it's getting a lot of press in the crypto community because it gives hope to altcoiners. But I think what it tells me is that, so the OCC generally provides guidance when large banks request specific guidance on a topic. When they petition to have have the rights to do something that they think would be positive for their businesses. That's the only way the OCC issues guidance. So this means that banks want to start using digital assets to exchange money between themselves. And more than anything, that's just like a big crack in the wall between the traditional system and embracing Bitcoin that is now there, that wasn't there a few days ago. And that trend, goes in one direction of that wall will keep getting cracks added to it until it just falls apart. And, the way that finance operates is fully integrated with Bitcoin as a settlement layer. So it doesn't directly mean that much, but it says that there's a lot going on behind the scenes of banks actively leaning into adopting digital assets. And yeah, that might mean altcoins for now, but we all know where that goes towards eventually. And it means that mainstream opinion of digital assets as a viable technology just took a step forward. Not a leap forward, but a solid step forward, and that's not going to reverse.
The thing about bull market cycles is we're going to have tons and tons of noise. We're going to have tons and tons of news items that people are going to pretend are way more bullish than they are. And media is going to hype the shit out of them because it gets them more clicks. And historically in the past, it's been the coin desks of the world, the blocks of the world, but now it's even the mainstream media. We had Fox Business saying that the OCC pumped the price of Bitcoin, and that's why the price of Bitcoin is going up. The reality is the head of the OCC is the former lead lawyer of Coinbase. And Coinbase has been obsessed with this bullshit fucking stable coins nonsense. And they've completely missed, the forest for the trees here. Obviously, sats are my stable coin. The stable coins don't solve anything. They're tied to a shitty money that is not stable inherently. And they require a trusted third party to use that is going to be regulated. So the whole censorship resistance value prop, the key reason I think the majority of us is here and why things have value, doesn't exist for them. So, of course, when he becomes, the head of the OCC, banks are allowed to use their, regulated stable, their VC chains and all this. I don't think it really. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think everything's good for Bitcoin, but I think the hype isn't there. The hype isn't where it should be here.
That's a good point. I fully agree with all that. And maybe the real utility of this news is simply that it generates hype and attention and attracts interest to the whole space, because even if it's a requirement to go through some altcoiner stage, which it isn't, but even if you have to go through that journey to eventually get to Bitcoin, every little piece of news that pops up on CNN or Forbes or whatever makes the people who've been sitting on the sidelines watching Bitcoin go up have just a little bit more FOMO and make them a little bit closer to jumping in. And maybe that's the utility that this news provides, is it just adds to this pile of FOMO that's going to force people eventually over the next year to jump into Bitcoin.
I want to point out one thing, Matt, why I brought it up in the first place and why I think it is more bullish than you might give it credit for. And this is the infrastructure inversion topic, because we won't see the mainstream banks settling anything on Bitcoin anytime soon. But what I think we will see is Bitcoin companies, they have the motivation now to actually become a bank and do that in be able to settle their payments globally in Bitcoin, also inside a jurisdiction where this is legal. You can, of course, just try to do it and break the law, whatever. But I think this is one step towards this infrastructure inversion. And I see a world already, for me, this is crystal clear that this is going to happen, that just apps like Cash App and Strike and everyone who is working on the payment rails side of things, so to speak, they will there will be a point where you can just basically do what WeChat and Alipay is doing in China, but you do it on Bitcoin and you do it in a free and censorship resistant way. I might be wrong, like I can see that possibility, but I think that it's one step towards the regulatory framework where something like that goes way easier for the companies that are actually working on that.
Look, I mean, I think there was good points made here on both sides, and I think it'll be pretty obvious, like as things start to play out, which stories are noise and which stories are signal, and I just caution people to just be wary. We're at the beginning, the precipice of a massive run here, and there's going to be so much noise, and there's going to be so much bullshit. And really, at the end of the day, like most of the shit doesn't matter, and Bitcoin will just keep trucking on. I want to
when ETF, man.
When ETF, yeah, exactly. Van Eck just recently launched their ETF again, so I'm sure we'll hear a bunch of stuff about that. Where did I want to bring this to? I wanted to bring this to something. Someone mentioned in here. So someone mentioned earlier, they said CoinJoin. Why do people say you should CoinJoin if you KYC and you should CoinJoin if you use BISC and you're not using KYC? And the reason is because CoinJoin is at its essence is a batch Bitcoin send transaction. It's a Bitcoin transaction that uses best practices in terms of privacy. And if you don't want the person who sends you Bitcoin, whether that's BISC or whether an individual on BISC, whether that's your employer who's paying you in Bitcoin, whether it's a customer at your store, whether that's Cash App who's sending it to you, if you don't want that person to know your total balances, all your future transactions, then you have to use CoinJoin. And the same goes for people you pay. And if you pay someone, you don't want them to know your current balance, your future balance, future transactions. You're gonna need to use CoinJoin. And this is just something that people need to keep in mind, because Bitcoin is an open ledger that's out there forever, and if we're right, it's going to exist forever and is never going to change. So you're going to just have this ledger of every single transaction you've ever made, and if you made a mistake, it's going to screw you in the future. So you need to start educating yourself on that now. A couple good guides are bitcoinprivacy.guide. Usewhirlpool.com is a CoinJoin specific guide. 6102bitcoin.com. Oh no, bitcoin-only.com/#privacy is another one. He should work on his domains. I think I have btcprivacy.org redirect to that. But anyway, there's a bunch of shills out for that. 6102 did have a question. That's what I wanted to bring up about Taproot. Do we think that this price appreciation is going to delay Taproot activation? What do we think about Taproot activation?
I actually don't think it has that much of an influence on a delay. I think we will see it this year, and I think support is strong in general. Last time I checked, it was like 95% plus on Taproot activation, and I think it's just in general this process is slow and should be slow, but I think that most people agree that this is a great upgrade, and the risks are, I think, kind of well understood and not too big in the first place. So I think the reason why I think that the price action doesn't delay too much is that most people that are actually working on Taproot and working on the activation and stuff like that, they've been around for a long while. I think they have their way of like they're in full.
No way, Gigi. It affects everybody.
You think so? You think it really affects?
You either have a lot of Bitcoin and the price is moving, affects your net worth significantly, or you don't have enough Bitcoin and the price moving is giving you massive FOMO. And either way, every single person you know in real life thinks of you as the Bitcoin guy and is starting to reach out to you. And they're going to start to reach out to you more and more.
That's true.
And you have people like Michael Saylor entering the ring that all have very big opinions and are talking all over the place, right? It just creates all this additional.
work.
So let's talk empirically. I want you both on the record. Today is January 5th, 2022. Hate to do it to you. Can I use
January
a Taproot?
6th, where I am.
Okay, January 6th. Apologies. Really, block time is all that matters. Can I use a Taproot address this time next year?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys are bullish.
I'm bullish on Taproot. No, I truly think that someone like Peter Wuller, and I have those people in mind. I don't think they're phased too much by the price action. They sit down and they do their thing, and
At this point,
it's gonna be
they're definitely getting hit up by all their friends who have ignored them for years now.
yeah.
So our text-based host 6102 Bitcoin asks, so if you think Taproot will be active at this point next year and we'll be using the address, what is the activation method? How does that look?
I have no idea. That's beyond me.
I just can't answer. I don't know. Like it's
Yeah, well, so it's easy to be bullish when you don't have a plan.
That's true.
that's right.
I mean, I think that Bitcoiners should start pushing for it, and I don't want people to think that I'm being derogatory towards it. I think being realistically pessimistic could maybe trigger people into pushing for it more. So hopefully they didn't hear me say that, and that's kind of what I've been going for, because I think everyone is being a little bit too naively bullish, when really we want like cautiously optimistic action, and we need people to like kind of push for this because after what happened last time, no one's paycheck relies on getting this thing activated, and no one wants to stand up to like push the ball forward. Basically, they don't want to get hit in all the crossfire. So it should be interesting to see how this plays out, and it's definitely a big thing that people should be watching for Bitcoin. I mean, like let's be honest though, like I don't think it. Bitcoin pumps regardless. It's not like price news.
Yeah, and also in terms of Taproot activation, I mean, everyone should understand that this is like a long process, just the activation process itself. Whatever path it will take, it will always be a long process. And then just also the
which is a feature. Let's explain why.
Of course, it is a feature, but also even if it's then activated, also just the network, every individual node gradually opting into the change and making use of it is an even longer process. Like we said,
that's
like
gonna be forever.
What's Segway the usage at? Like it's I don't know.
It's at like 50% or something.
yeah. So that's ridiculous. And so I would say like Taproot, yes, for the very enthusiastic people that are super early, but like widespread usage, that takes its time, and that's a feature.
And why is that a feature? Let's explain this.
I'm not sure if I can do it quickly because like third glass of whiskey. But what everyone has to understand is Bitcoin works because you run your own network, so to speak. You make the rules. Your node makes the rules, and there is just no way to force anyone to opt into anything like that. There are no automatic upgrades. There is no like Bitcoin. There are no Bitcoin high priests that decide what gets activated. Everyone has to decide. It's like different actors have to decide to upgrade their nodes, and that's why even if it becomes part of the protocol and of the client and all of that, everyone has to decide individually to upgrade to a certain version, activate it, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean the simple concept to see here is if there was a central party that can initiate auto updates, then that central party becomes an attack vector, and they can easily just add some kind of malicious update that either benefits themselves or if they're forced to by a regulatory body, which is historically what we've seen with any kind of financial system that tries to subvert authority. And this goes back to that shitcoin conversation previously. Is if you have these centralized chains, like they just cannot provide, this idea of decentralization, of distribution, of robustness is not a question of marketing. It's not a question of selling the token. It's a question of absolute necessity. If you do not have the capability to resist centralized action by regulatory bodies, by these massive nation states, then your chain will have to bend to the will to them. Your project will have to bend to the will to them, and then all of a sudden you have all this KYC and stuff that gets added in, which is exactly what we're trying to subvert in the first place. Is exactly what the value prop is in the first place, right?
Absolutely, amen to that.
So Crow, someone is asking you, let me see, I got it right here. SM on YouTube is asking you, based on your threads, have we seen the supply shock yet?
Yeah, fun question. So for people who haven't seen it, I put out like a series of visualizations of what the halving does to the balance of supply and demand, and how that so that is the supply shock, is when at the halving suddenly there's half as much supply. So it's a shock to the balance of the market, and from that point in time, a supply shortage accumulates little by little every day, every month from that point on, because in truth there's only so much Bitcoin available for sale on the marketplace, and that's really what gets eaten into as the net shortage of new supply causes the market to drain the available for sale Bitcoin and turn that into people holding Bitcoin. So suddenly that the amount of available for sale Bitcoin shrinks over time, over the ensuing months. And when I looked back at the previous cycles and looked at sort of what the HODL waves looked like after that, after the halvings, it seems to be that after 6 months is when the shortage starts to shift from being like a theoretical one, or one that's sort of slightly happening, to suddenly being felt quite acutely and increasingly acutely, specifically because as the price starts to drift upwards to unlock supply, because there's so much demand that it bids it up in order to find more supply. That it's around 6 months that the drifting up of supply of price causes there to be more demand for Bitcoin, which is what we're seeing right now. So the acute shortage as a result of the accumulation of each day, each 10 minutes, there being a deficit of supply is starting now, and it's still in its early stages because we've got another year or maybe 9 months, but at least that, before this thing plays out to its mania stage that we've seen in the past.
Gigi, you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, not too many. I think I really like the visualizations in the thread that really drives home how this dynamic kind of plays out. I would just also like to point out that while I see the cycle pattern repeating, I just think nobody knows what Bitcoin's gonna do, and so I think I think some people are really speculating on certain numbers and just certain repetitions of the past, so to speak. And I'm not confident that it will be like exactly the same. It might be even more stupid. Like
This time is different. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily, because like I like the calculations that the humble friar is doing all the time, in terms of, to keep a certain price level you have to have a certain amount of it's basically also what's visualized in Crow's thread, that you have to take the new supply off the market. So you have to eat up the new supply. And Has McCook has great calculations how much DCA is necessary just to eat up the new supply. And that's like the new supply is tiny in terms of liquidity, in terms of what is
I mean,
actually.
we're eating that up already, right?
Yeah. But I just think that the dynamics, like some things have changed. I'm not saying this is the last cycle. Like, again, I don't believe that, but
It's not the fucking last cycle.
I just repeated that just to trigger you, Matt.
I opened Twitter for like a little bit to see if there was any comments on the Twitter main thread, and I saw Stefan was like 2 cycles and done. And he just tweeted it out. Such a fucking meme, man.
But I think, you know, what I think is interesting is, for example, the Glassnode statistics that we see that historically, when the price shoots up, the amount that is sitting on exchanges shoots up as well. And this is just not happening this time, at least not up to now. So yeah, the reverse.
This is the first time ever that the exchange balances has gone down. But I would caution people that Glassnode and the other one I think is Viewbase that is tracking it. They don't include the custodians. So like when the Michael Saylors and the Scaramucci's and stuff are taking it off of Coinbase and they're sending it to like Anchorage and Prime Trust, like there's not much of a difference there. I do think there's like millions of humble sat stackers out there that are pulling Bitcoin off of exchanges into their own self custody, and I think that's the most bullish fundamental. But I think people need to be aware that, you know, like that Glassnode chart, for instance, is it's not counting these regulated custodians, which might as well, you know, I think the difference between an Anchorage wallet or a Prime Trust wallet, you know, a top tier regulated custodian versus Coinbase, the number one largest regulated exchange and custodian, is probably minor, right? In terms of U.S. government interference or whatnot.
I agree. And it always depends on how you want to look at it. Like every single point of failure is a single point of failure, and we can see like just crazy things happening if a large amount of coins are concentrated with those single custodians.
Our boy Dreamin, I don't know how to pronounce it. There's a special place in hell for you and people like Crow who pick names that are hard to pronounce intentionally because you got to pick the name. He said for some fiat currencies, this will be the last cycle. I mean, by that method, I mean the last cycle was the first cycle.
That's true. I mean, he's right. He's right about that. That they're just some horrible shit coins. I think.
Like, when do you decide? When do you decide? At what threshold do you decide? These things have been dumping forever. I put up USD Sat before. I'm currently in like a nice cabin in the woods, and my internet's not that good. So when I tried to put up USD Sat, the page started glitching out. But you know, the dollar has been collapsing this whole fucking time. You know, since cycle one, since before Bitcoin existed. Like, at what point do you do that threshold? At what point does it stop being a meme? Like, there's going to be massive corrections. Like, I would be really surprised. That'd be awesome, but I'd be really surprised if there wasn't some kind of massive corrections as this adoption cycle plays out.
I think Bitcoin took over another fiat currency at the point where one Satoshi buys you multiple instances of your fiat shitcoin. Like if one Satoshi is like $3, then it's game over. And we saw that with a bunch of currencies.
It's like sat dollar domination instead of parity.
Yeah. But I think, you know, like if you can't break it down into if the worth of one of your fiat units goes below one Satoshi, then it's game over, I would say. Then it's officially a dead shitcoin.
But we could go lower.
They can go to zero, yeah, of course. they will all go to zero. I think that's clear.
Crow, we've been kind of talking over you. Got anything for us?
Not at the moment. Kind of reached a point where I didn't have any thoughts.
Freak, this has been a great conversation. Do you have any final questions for us? I don't want to push this longer than I'm having a great time, but I don't want to push this longer than quality allows. 1 sat equals 1 cent. Yes, I agree. 1,200 joules per sat is my price prediction. I like that, but I actually kind of think maybe just sat is the universal unit of like pretty much everything. It's like what the conversion rate is to sats. Maybe you won't even need joules to measure energy if you could just measure it in sats output. But maybe I'm just going too deep now.
And Matt, would you buy a stranded natural gas well and set up a hash hut thing?
Yeah, I think the key to mining that people don't realize in the next generation of mining is going to be basically mining at basically at break even or below, slightly below. And the benefit you get is you get a steady supply of KYC free coins. And I think really, and the reason we haven't seen it is because it's hard to get large amounts of ASICs, and ASICs, their life cycles don't last as long as they probably should. The life cycles are increasing in terms of buying an ASIC until it goes outdated. But I think ultimately the future of Bitcoin mining is these small scale mining ops that are willing to sustain a loss. Like I would be happy to sustain like a 20% loss on regulated market price to get like a steady stream of KYC free sats.
Wow, 20%. That is a high premium.
You wouldn't pay 20% for like a secret bag, like a constant secret bag that just was like filling up.
But you are towards the extreme on in terms of valuing that, and I frequently, when I listen to your stuff, I'm always like.
But let's talk about what 20% is right now, right? That's like paying 39,000 a coin for KYC free sats, right?
Yeah, and maybe
that's not bad. That's not a bad price, is it? Like we're gonna go substantially higher than that.
That's true. That's not. Yeah, it depends on what time frame you're looking at. It's a deal a year from now. Yeah.
I'm muted. This is a good question. Can we talk about BISC and counterparty risk? How can I ensure that the person selling it to me doesn't know who I am and how much I own? How can I ensure they're not selling me stolen KYC coins? So you can't. The biggest risk of BISC, the biggest pain point of BISC is the fiat side. And this is why Bitcoin's dope, right? Like fiat is a pain in the ass to interact with, and it's not great for privacy. So obviously, if you're sending a bank transfer to someone, it's going to have whatever traits that bank transfer option you have, depending on where you live in the world. Some people have better options. You know, in America, people have like Zelle. I think in Japan, they have better systems in place that their fiat payments are better. But that will always be the pain point. You can also on BISC use a person-to-person cash, which is obviously will always be better for privacy. And I think they have like Amazon gift cards and stuff that you could technically use. It'll always be a pain point. The fiat side is a pain point. Why we Bitcoin? You know, you don't have that pain point once you move to Bitcoin. As for the second part, I mean, you know, this is an issue with Bitcoin fungibility in general, right? And this is why people should be using CoinJoin. This is why like the historical path of where Bitcoin's been shouldn't matter. And it's something that is not unique to Bitcoin. And, you know, if you get cash, like how do you know where that cash came from? So you need to. This is why it's super important that even people that use non-KYC options also learn how to use Bitcoin more privately and learn these tools. What do you guys think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you were on point with all of those things. Just keep in mind that meeting someone in meet space has its own set of risks. So just be aware of that, even though in terms of privacy, it might be the best option.
Right. We just had a guy in Hong Kong who did like a face-to-face cash deal. And
yeah. So I just wanted to point it out because I think not everyone thinks adversarially, and so just keep that in mind that you have to be comfortable with doing that. And yeah, I mean, it really depends on how you want to use Bisq. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend you do. It's really easy to use. I would say, like, if you if you're good with like clicking through UIs, then it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And as Matt said, the biggest pain point is your you interacting with the fiat system. And in terms of on the privacy side, I think a good way to think about coin joins in general is just like think about it in a way just like you would clear your browser history, for example. And the problem is that everyone has access to your browser history. So you kind of have a way to clear the history of the coins you use. And if you if you don't reuse addresses, which you should never do, and if you take care of your UTXOs and kind of learn about the best practices in Bitcoin privacy, then you should be good on the Bitcoin side when interacting with someone else in Bisq. Someone asked what an XPub is. I would mark it as a troll. I'm not Peter McCormick. If you want to know what an XPub is, just suffer through Matt's and Pete's conversation.
No, don't. Gigi actually, he's understating himself as he usually does. Has a whole post on what an XPub is. I guess where is that? Is that on the Swan blog, Gigi?
Yeah, it's on the Swan blog. Yeah. I also wrote a tool where you can play around with your XPub if you want to. It's you can even, if you're paranoid, you can look through the whole source code and disconnect from the internet and just use your XPub. As Matt said, an XPub is basically best understood as your few key, so you cannot send any coins, but you can see the whole wallet, so you can see what's going on. And an XPub is used. It's like a parent key. It's like a master key that can use more addresses, and it's all of it is nuanced. So there are different types of XPubs, and what an XPub basically is certain kind of information that lets you build up a hierarchy of addresses, and wallets use that to have just one secret that they need to take care of, so to speak, and vendors use that so that they can generate receiving addresses easily without giving away too much secret information. And services use XPubs sometimes. So it's in a way also, it's a hack for best practice. You don't want to reuse addresses, and so you force users to hand over an XPub so that you on your side, you become a trusted third party, and you generate a new address for every transfer. And so someone else that is spying on the Bitcoin blockchain cannot see how much you're saving, for example. So I hope that somewhat makes sense. Go read the blog post. Again, fourth glass of whiskey now. So if that doesn't make sense, I apologize. It's very late where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we appreciate your time, Gigi. I mean, the idea is, Randy McMillan, is that you share the XPub with Swan, and you're trusting them with that privacy. Gigi designed the tool so that they don't actually receive the XPub; they just receive the generated addresses, and you can actually verify it because it's a open source tool. It's a free open source tool. But most people can't read code, so you should probably just, when you interact with that feature, you should just have a dedicated wallet. Best practices is to have a dedicated wallet that is like your Swan wallet, right? And you just assume that every transaction in that wallet, Swan can see. And someone else asked, which this ties into, Jacob, I guess, I don't know how to pronounce your name, I apologize, asked if CoinJoin truly clears the UTXO history, and no, it doesn't. It's very obvious that you did a CoinJoin. But if you used a good implementation and you did it without making any mistakes, it's difficult to backtrack the CoinJoin happened. So it kind of creates like a base slate. It like wipes the slate clean, is the way I view it. It creates like a neutral property. It's just a normal Bitcoin transaction with no taint. The only taint being that CoinJoin has happened. But every other Bitcoin transaction has had the history of it ever till the beginning.
I would encourage everyone to look a little bit deeper into that topic and try to truly understand it, because it's very enlightening in the way that Bitcoin operates, because the way that chain surveillance companies make sense of the transaction history is that the only thing that they have is heuristics. They can only look at certain kinds of transactions and assume who the parties involved were. And coin joins just break those kind of heuristics, and they are able to do that. Like you can't really track Bitcoin, even though everything is public, but just the nature of the protocol is such that every single transaction is a smelting process. So you have multiple inputs and multiple outputs, and you can think of it as just gold coins going in somewhere, and they're smelted, and they're they reappear at the end of the transaction as new coins in the correct denomination. And that's how Bitcoin works, basically. And so most transactions have a regular footprint, so to speak, or you can see that this is just like a regular transaction, like one person interacting with another one, or like it has like a certain number of inputs, a certain number of outputs, and so on. And so surveillance companies assume that this was a regular transaction, and this is like the receiving address, and this is the change address, and the party that initiated the transaction is still in charge of the change address, and so on. And so you can build up a chain, and you can kind of with a high confidence say that here we have an entity that was in control of these coins, and this is how the coins moved. And so you can see that in the blockchain. But keep in mind that those are all just heuristics, and coin joins are certain kinds of transactions. Like they're nothing illegal or anything like that. It's just a very peculiar transaction type, and they're just collaborative transactions of multiple parties. And this breaks the common heuristics that most chain analysis firms use, because you cannot assume anymore that it was one person that did that, and then you're just lost. You cannot make sense of the transaction graph anymore.
It's purely a Bitcoin transaction that applies best practices that we know right now today, and it would be like to say not to use CoinJoin would be like to say that like we should just use Bitcoin the way that version 1 used Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think you were going to say to not to use CoinJoin is just use HTTP instead of HTTPS, because we had the same thing kind of in the internet, and now it's just HTTPS and SSL and everything is like the standard. And if your browser screams at you if the connection is not encrypted, and I think we will see the same thing in Bitcoin. It will just take time, and with the protocol upgrades that are in the pipeline, we won't have to talk about coin joins in that kind of depth anymore. I think in like 5 years time, we will have to deal with different topics, but not with that anymore that much.
I think on a completely separate topic, Windshield Time said everyone is getting a girlfriend, LOL, which is like a growing meme. I just, in all seriousness, like you should absolutely by all means have a girlfriend, but don't commit to her unless she goes through at least one bear cycle. Preferably 2 bear cycles. You gotta test her out. You can't dedicate yourself to someone in just one bull cycle.
I like that wisdom. That's dating wisdom from Bitcoiners holding through volatility.
I mean, if she can go through a bear market with a Bitcoiner, I mean, is there any more dedication than that? Like that's like some pretty massive Bitcoiner leverage right there.
I was about to say that the true unsung heroes are the wives and girlfriends behind the Bitcoiners. And I'm not saying that all Bitcoiners are male, but I still think that most are. And it's, so I can speak from personal experience. It's the ride was very, very wild. And you love to see it that Bitcoiners tend to kind of, I think it's a low time preference thing as well. Bitcoiners tend to marry and make kids and stuff like that, and you just love to see it. Like we need more of that.
I've been trying out a new tactic with my friends who are very much on the sideline, on the fence about Bitcoin still. If they're women, I've been prodding with this idea of this is how gender inequity perpetuates, because look around and look who are the people leaning into the risk of being early on Bitcoin, and are you going to let the men have all the reap all the rewards of that risk, which has been a bit of a touchy conversation to have with some of my MBA friends who are this, in very left-leaning MBA culture. That's very provocative language, but rather effective. So I encourage people to try some variant of that and see how it goes with the women in your life who are risk averse to Bitcoin still.
So what you're saying is that all the girls should put their boobs on the table and start stacking. That's what you're saying.
In so many words, Gigi.
I love it.
I love both you guys. So Crypt Loco asked, what happened to local Bitcoins? Local Bitcoins added KYC. Like, this is the problem. Like, if you have a centralized party, they're going to add it. He's asking, why is there another company that's not providing an in-person solution for buying Bitcoin? I think this is something that just long-term works itself out. Like you just, and we've seen this with the drug war. Like, people in your town or your area that can get you, drugs for cash. And there's going to be this like P2P market for it that just grassroots emerges in different places. And if you try and do a top-down approach, you're always going to get hit by regulators. You're always going to get wrecked by regulators. And long term, I mean, when we end in this like circular economy type of situation, people aren't going to be buying Bitcoin. They're going to be earning it. People aren't going to be selling it. They're going to be spending it. And you won't even need this process of trying to change shitty money to good money.
Yeah. So what Matt is trying to say is just find your local orange pill dealer and hit him up, and just if you have a stack, then maybe it's time for you to become one. I don't know. I like that idea. Kind of like I sold KYC free Bitcoin from time to time just to onboard people. I think it's a nice way to just show someone how this works and get the feet wet. But it's also like it. Most of the time it doesn't take, and people just lose their wallets or something. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think all of those things will emerge, and we see that over and over and over again. And if the need is strong enough, then those kind of solutions will pop up. And people are very like smart with coming up with solutions to those kind of problems. And I think we will just see new kind of things emerge. And yeah, who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm very bullish on all kinds of non-central ways to interact with Bitcoin and acquire Bitcoin and stuff like that.
Goji is asking, is it best to have a dedicated laptop computer to use with Cold Card? Yes. It's always better to have a dedicated computer. The main risk is privacy, but you also have a little bit of funds risk. It's just better to use a dedicated computer if you can. Just slowly level up your setup. The guide I've been shilling of my own is werunbitcoin.com. And what's nice there is you can start with maybe not a dedicated computer, and you can slowly upgrade yourself. And you can upgrade yourself to multi-sig. So it's been about 2 hours and 20 minutes. My lady, who is a very dedicated Bitcoiner, is probably a little bit frustrated with me. We're in a nice cabin in the woods, and it's time for me to have dinner with her and appreciate her. I want to say a big thank you to all the freaks who joined us for the live stream. This show is about you guys. The whole idea of this show is, and what I love about it is that you all participate and you get to ask questions, and we get to riff off those questions. So without you, the show is nothing. So thank you for attending. Thank you for all the listeners who are listening to this after the fact. We will have another show next week, same time. I think I like this time better. Tell me if you don't like this time better. This is 2200 UTC, 5 p.m. Eastern time. I want to do a big thanks to croesus BTC for joining us, our friend dergigi for joining us. You can find them both on Twitter at their respective handles. I'm showing them on the screen right now. Dergigi is at DERGIGI, and croesus BTC is at CROESUS_BTC. Thank you all for joining. Stay humble and stack sats.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having us. That was great.
Hey, hey moon, it's funny how time just flies. Yesterday we were just kids, hanging in the sky, staying up all night. Hey, hey moon, do you ever get a tear in your eye when you think about the time that God came down? I couldn't help myself, I had to shine so bright. I remember that newborn baby and the wise men that traveled so far. That's when I knew I was made for a reason. I feel like the luckiest star. Hey moon, hey, hey moon, it's funny how things have changed. I wish that they could see the things we've seen before the colored lights and the Christmas tree. Hey, hey moon, so many are still searching for signs. God is stirring in their hearts, they will lift their wandering eyes and see us shine. Then they'll remember that newborn baby and the wise men that traveled so far. They'll know they were made for a reason. I feel like the luckiest star. Hey moon, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. I remember that newborn baby and the wise men that traveled so far. I know I was made for a reason. I feel like the luckiest star. Hey moon, hey moon, hey moon, hey, hey moon.
Love you, freaks. We'll see you next week.